Hello everybody, a very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock. You're very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. It began late last night, Russia's new offensive in eastern Ukraine that's been called the Battle for Donbas. Reports coming in overnight of several areas targeted along the front line. We'll take you through it and also get reaction from Ukrainian voices too. The other big story today, of course, a Prime Minister preparing to face down his MPs over Partygate by making a statement in the Commons. But with more fines possibly heading his way and several Tory MPs saying that he should go now, will it draw a line under Partygate? We'll get the view of the Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis in just a moment, and also the Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry. Plus, we'll speak to one of those senior Conservatives who think he should go that's at 8:30. We'll find out more then. It's Tuesday, the 19th of April.
The battle for Donbas. Ukraine says Russia has begun a major new offensive in the east.
Misery of Mariupol, how the last remaining residents of the besieged city spend their days, with claims Russia is using bunker buster bombs. Partygate pressure. The Prime Minister prepares to update Parliament on those Downing Street allegations as the number of Tories calling for him to go grows.
I'm in Dover, where more boats of asylum seekers arrived over the sunny bank holiday weekend, and it looks like pressure and backlash over the policy to send them to Rwanda looks set to increase.
The greatest pain any parents can feel. Manchester United footballer Cristiano Ronaldo says he and his partner are devastated as they announce the death of one of their newborn twins. The Great Rail Sale, why plans to sell thousands of train tickets for less to boost travel post-COVID, are in the firing line. Depp v. Heard, we bring you the latest revelations from court, including photos of apparent injuries, with Johnny Depp expected to give evidence later on today. Also coming up on the programme for you this morning, wherever you're watching us around the world, a snapshot of homelessness in modern Britain. To mark this new exhibition, we'll speak to a woman who used to live on the streets, who turned her life around, and that's just after 9:30.
Jess Bamra. Oh! Want something more?
And have we got what it takes to bend it like Beckham 20 years on from the hit movie? We'll ask a football coach, Yasmin Hussain, what it meant for helping to boost women's football in the UK. Morning, everyone. We start with the breaking news you're waking up to, that Russia has begun its new offensive in eastern Ukraine. Reports coming into us overnight of a push by Russian military across much of the front line that stretches some 300 miles across the Donbas region. This, the new tactic after President Putin failed in his bid to take Kiev. The head of Ukraine's National Security Council saying their military is, for now, holding out. So the Ukraine military's general staff says that Vladimir Putin's forces have increased assaults in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions in the Donbas, as well as in the area close by. Meanwhile, Ukrainian military officials said street battles have begun in Crimea and that evacuation is impossible. In the southern port city of Mariupol, a commander of the Ukrainian National Guard that was holding out against Russian forces said in a video message that Russia had begun dropping bunker-busting bombs on the Azovstal steel plant where the regiment is taking cover. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the attack in his nightly address to the nation.
Now
we can state that Russian troops have begun the battle for the Donbas, for which they have been preparing for a long time. A significant part of the entire Russian army is now concentrated on this offensive. No matter how many Russian troops are driven there, we will fight. We'll defend ourselves and we'll do it every day. We won't give up anything Ukrainian.
Deborah standing by for us in Kiev again this morning. Hello to you, Deborah. It had been talked about for some time. It looks as though the Russians are moving in to the east of the country now.
Yes, this is a second and potentially decisive phase of the war. We're almost a full 8 weeks into the invasion. Russian forces gave up effectively on their initial attempt to take the capital. They pulled their forces out of the north of the country and regrouped them in the east. The east has been a scene of war as well from the beginning, but now the new Russian tactic, having failed to break Ukraine's defences in a simultaneous fashion across the whole of the country, is to concentrate its superior firepower on the east. This could well be the biggest test yet for Ukraine's armed forces, and both sides need to win. Russia suffered a defeat here in Kyiv, and it needs to win in the east. Ukraine, of course, needs to keep its territory.
Thanks very much. Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Brandon Lewis, is with us this morning. Can we start with Ukraine, please? Minister, thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. What's the latest situation as we understand it in the Donbas region?
Well, as you've just reported, actually, we've all seen the reports overnight with Russia's moving on that eastern side. And we will continue to, as we've said all the way through, to do everything we can to support Ukraine in what is a ferocious battle with an invasion Putin is taking forward that is becoming more and more abhorrent by the day, if that's possible.
What are we going to do about these 2 British fighters that have been taken hostage?
Well, it's dreadful to see anybody being taken hostage, obviously British forces, and that's something the government is always very focused on. The Prime Minister is continually in contact with colleagues and partners around the world, both through NATO and obviously directly with President Zelensky. We'll continue to do everything we can to support anybody who's from the UK, and anybody actually, as we have done with the Ukrainian people in the work that they're doing to defend their country and a democratic country.
But how much sympathy should we have for them? I remember the Defence Secretary saying at the time that he really didn't appreciate, I think it was him or in fact the Armed Forces Minister saying, you know, people going out there just so they can get selfies to come back. How much sympathy should we have for people that go when they were told they shouldn't? Well,
look, one of the things that's very clear is this is a very dangerous situation. The armed forces, both the Ukrainian armed forces and the UK armed forces, have their own processes and procedures. People should be following the law. So we are there to support Ukraine. We are doing that in a very practical way. As Northern Ireland Secretary, I've been very fortunate to see some of the work being done in Northern Ireland, producing the end laws, for example, which are being sent out to Ukraine. That's what we're doing as a country, and that's the right way it should be. People who want to support Ukraine, what we would encourage people to do is to do it through the right channels, putting that financial support in, as hundreds of thousands of people here in the UK are doing, rather than taking very dangerous and actually not legal processes to go out and act in that way. But having said that, obviously we want to see everybody in Ukraine being safe of whatever their nationality, and that's why it's important that Russia and Putin's regime pull out of this invasion.
But are we involved in trying to get them back to the UK?
Well, look, I appreciate I'm not going to comment on what are effectively national security issues. What we're saying to people is you should not be travelling out to Ukraine.
Why is it a national security issue?
Because I'm not going to comment on armed forces processes, and I'm not going to comment on...
Well, they're not armed forces, are they?
Well, we are in an armed conflict in Ukraine, and it is right that we continue to be very clear with people. Well, Ukraine is in an armed conflict with Putin.
Exactly.
I'm sure the president of Ukraine would say it is an armed conflict. We are supporting that. We're doing that through the proper processes and the proper ways. They are no, they're absolutely they're illegally.
But do we still have a responsibility to bring them back home?
Well, we always have a responsibility for British citizens, which we take seriously. We've got to get the balance right with Ukraine. That's why I say to anybody, do not travel illegally to Ukraine. The armed forces in Ukraine have the support of the UK. We're continuing to put that support in, and that's the right way to do it. And people who want to help in Ukraine, there are ways to do that, both financially and people who open up their homes. That is not the way to do it.
I understand. What Russia's saying is if you give us Viktor Medvedchuk, then you can have these 2 Brits back. Is that something that we would get involved with, that sort of negotiation? This is an oligarch who, as we know, was an opposition leader in Ukraine for a while, MP there, I think, at the moment.
Well, we're actually going through the process of sanctioning people who are close to the Putin regime. We're not going to be looking at how we can help Russia. We're looking to actually ensure that the Putin regime is unsuccessful in this abhorrent invasion, and we'll continue to do everything we can to support the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian president and government to defeat Putin.
I understand. So these guys are on their own then, really, for now?
Well, they shouldn't have been there. It is an illegal act to be there. Obviously, anybody will have sympathy with somebody who has been taken hostage, but we have got to make sure that we follow the proper processes, that we are dealing with this in the right way. We give the support in the right way that the Ukrainian armed forces and the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian people can make good use of. That is what those official processes are about. That's what hundreds of thousands of people here in the UK are doing, and we should all be very proud of that and grateful to the people of the UK who are doing that.
Let's talk about the fact that it's 1,000 days today since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. There was an opinion poll out yesterday, JL Partners, saying the words that were Bit of water before we go with this one. Things like the way they described him was liar. That was the most common word used, right in the middle of this bubble here, followed by incompetent and untrustworthy. It's not a great look, is it? Buffoon in there as well.
Well, look, I work with the Prime Minister on a range of issues across the UK, and obviously particularly for Northern Ireland. And I've been working with someone whose focus has always been on delivering for people. Whether it's been through COVID, all the way through COVID.
Yeah, but perception's reality, isn't it? And this is what people think of him. Well, this is why I've got to say the Prime Minister himself has been very clear in the statement he made last week. He's apologised for what's happened. He said he would make changes at Number 10, which he has been making. We've seen some substantial changes there. And he's focused, but that, you know, the key people, the Chief of Staff. 5 people. He's already changed the Chief of Staff and some of the key people around the team in Number 10, which he said he would do. Yeah. He is very much focused on the issues that are affecting people, whether it's around the cost of living, whether it's around continuing the work as we come out of COVID and supporting, obviously, the people of Ukraine. But he did say that he hadn't broken the rules, but he paid a fine. So he must have realised that he'd broke the rules in order to pay the fine, no? Why didn't he contest it? As he said in his statement last week, the Prime Minister's been very... It's not because he's a liar, is it? No, as he said last week in his statement, and the Prime Minister will be talking to Parliament later today, so he'll make a statement, but at every point he has been clear with what he believes to be the truth. What he's also accepting is the police have looked into this particular issue. They've taken a view that a fine should be issued. Whether he accepts that, he has paid that fine, he's apologised for that. But does he accept that he broke the rules? Well, he's accepted that the police have said that the rules were broken and therefore they've issued a fine. But does he accept that he broke the rules? But that is very different to... Well, it is very different. That's why I'm asking you to clarify it. The point he made to Parliament was that when he spoke to Parliament, he was speaking what he believed to be the truth and what he outlined to be the truth. That is absolutely right and proper. But does he accept that he now broke the rules that he made? As he said last week, he absolutely accepts. The police have found that the rules were broken to a point that they issued a fine. Well, it is, because that's why he's paid the fine. And he has outlined that he accepts that. No. Does he accept that he broke the rules? Well, in the sense he's paid a fine that the police have decided it's issued because the rules were broken. But that doesn't mean that anything he said to Parliament was inaccurate at the time. Why not? Because what he said to Parliament, he believed to be true at the time. On the 1st of December, he said, all guidance was followed completely in Number 10. On the 8th of December, he said no party and no COVID rules were broken. Yeah, and he believed that to be absolutely true. So what did he think was happening when there was cake and people singing happy birthday and drinking beer? What did he think it was? As the Prime Minister himself has outlined, and he did in his statement last week, that he was at work all day, he was at work when people then came in and wished him happy birthday, in the same way that Keir Starmer was at work when he was pictured having pizza and beer with his staff. But and that's something that I take up with Labour later on, and they will be as robustly defending their leader as you are defending the Prime Minister. But of course, it's not just one incident, is it? It's not just one incident. Let me just finish. That's why the Prime Minister was very clear with Parliament. He did not believe at that point that anything he'd done was against the rules. But he absolutely accepts the police have looked at this, they've taken a different view, they've issued a fine, he's apologised, he's paid the fine, and he has been very clear about that. Yet 2 weeks before, it's suggested in this weekend's papers that he was organising the event for Lee Kane, his head of comms, to leave. So was that a party or not? Well, I have to say, we haven't seen that part of the investigation yet. We've got to let the police do their work, get to the bottom of all of these. So let me put it this way then. I can only comment on what has been decided so far. Yeah, so he's broken the law on one occasion, we know at the moment. Can a lawmaker ever be a lawbreaker? Yeah, I think, look, we do see consistently, whether it's through parking fines, whether it's through speeding fines, ministers of both parties over the years have been in that position. He was making these laws. But we've had prime ministers in the past have penalty notices, from what I can see, and we've also had front bench ministers. Well, I saw there was a parking notice that Tony Blair had once. We've seen front bench Labour ministers. No, you make the point. So you think as well, the previous prime minister having a parking fine is in any way correlated to our Prime Minister making COVID rules when the country was in lockdown, 120,000 people have died, and you can make the comparison between the two? You're saying to me... No, I'm asking you if you can. You asked me if somebody who sets the laws and the rules can also be somebody who breaks rules. That clearly has happened with a number of ministers over the years. But Tony Blair didn't make the rules on parking. Well, the government is responsible for all of the rules and regulations, so you could argue that governments don't pass some of the specific local fines on parking, but still, if a parking fine is broken, it's still a law of the country. Are you completely comfortable making the comparisons with parking fines and what the Prime Minister did? I'm just making the point that... No, I'm just asking if you are, in all sincerity. Yeah, absolutely, in the sense that ministers in the past have
sadly, been subject to getting fixed penalty notices on a range of issues. They can continue to be ministers. They do continue to be ministers. We've seen that in both governments, of the previous Labour government as well as the current Conservative government. The focus has to be on accepting when you've done something wrong, acknowledging that you've done that, which the Prime Minister has, and being focused on moving forward to do things in the right way. And what he has been focused on, and we have to say all through COVID, through this issue with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the work we're doing on the cost of living at the moment that's making life difficult for so many people across the country, we've got a Prime Minister who's focused on delivering on those things in a way that works for people in this country. And that's why he's had my support and will continue to.
But that's why, that's why people think he's a liar, because he says, I didn't break the rules twice. He misled Parliament, some might say. And yet he still doesn't accept that he broke the rules.
Well, that's not the case. First of all, he hasn't misled Parliament. He has outlined to Parliament what he believes to be the case and the truth at the point. He has equally, quite rightly, apologised for what has happened, accepted the position the police have taken and paid the fine. And he is very much focused, even on that day, if you look at his diary for that day, focused on the issues that are affecting people across the country on a range of things. As I say, across cost of living, issues with the war in Ukraine, issues as we're moving out and were moving out of COVID and getting our country moving forward in a way that as men, we're having the success economically that we're having compared to other countries.
If there are any more fines, will they be made public?
The Prime Minister has always been very clear that he'll be very open about any fines that he receives.
So if there are any more, we will hear about.
Well, so no reason why anything would change. He's always said he will be very clear and open about that.
The First
and he'll be
Minister
making
has actually said that to me,
today.
so thank you for the clarification. And I just wanted to clarify as far as the ministerial code is concerned, because you said he didn't break the rules. It features a forward by the Prime Minister himself, and it says ministers who knowingly misled Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation to the Prime Minister. You're saying that he didn't knowingly mislead them because on the 1st and the 8th of December, when he said what he said, he didn't realise that when he was in the cabinet room and potentially other places, and there was cake and goodness knows what else, he didn't realise that was breaking the rules at the time.
No, exactly.
So what's happened for him to now realise? He still didn't think he'd broken the rules until the police told him.
Well, as I said, his view when he outlined that to Parliament was that he was saying, making a statement of fact, what he believed to be true. That is absolutely the right thing to do. It's what you do in Parliament. And what he has done since then, as we saw last week with the fine from the police, is accepted the police have come to view. He has paid that fine. He has apologised. And he is making changes in number 10, as he said he would, to reflect the changes that need to be made.
So when did he realise that he'd broken the law?
Well, as you said, when the police have issued a fine, the Prime Minister has accepted that they've come to that conclusion.
But he'd sacked people before then. You said that he was clearing out before then in number 10.
He accepted before then, as we've said, and I think I spoke to you on this programme about this a
So he did
few weeks
accept
ago.
before the police?
He accepted that things had happened at number 10 that people didn't like, shouldn't have happened.
My question is, when did he realise he'd broken the law?
When the police issued him a fine, he has accepted that.
But why did he sack
position.
people before then?
Because there's a difference between whether the police decide if there is a fine to issue because a law has been broken is different to whether you realise and take a view that things that were happening at number 10 and the way things were happening at number 10 was not right and was not appropriate. He took action on that a fair few weeks ago now, a couple of months ago now, as he said he would, and apologised for those issues. He outlined to Parliament that his view was that he hadn't broken any rules. That was the right thing to do. That was his belief at the time. He is also accepting that police have come to a different view on this particular event. They've issued a fine. He accepts that. He's acknowledged that. He's paid the fine and apologised.
And we're going to hear more from him, I think about 3:30 this afternoon. When he
yes,
speaks.
Later on this afternoon.
Lovely. It's great to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you. Well, as we've been hearing, Mr Johnson is expected to update the Commons around about 3:30 this afternoon as Parliament resumes after the Easter break. We'll have full coverage here on Sky News. And on Wednesday, actually, of this week, I'm going to be chatting to the US ambassador to the UK for now. That's Philip Rieker, for a US perspective on the war in Ukraine and other pertinent questions of the day. That's at 8:30 on Wednesday morning. Nowhere is safe, the harrowing headline in The Eye, which reports on what it calls a major escalation of the Russian offensive in Ukraine. According to The Times, the Ukrainian president, that's Volodymyr Zelensky, of course, believes this means that the next phase of the war has begun. The Mirror looks ahead to Boris Johnson's appearance in Parliament today, where he'll face questions over his Partygate fine. The Metro hears that 1 million discounted train tickets are to go on sale in an effort to encourage rail service and rail travel. The Sun leads with the death of the newborn son of the footballer Cristiano Ronaldo and his partner. Still to come on the programme for you this morning, later in the hour, speaking to the former British ambassador to Russia, Sir Tony Brenton, about the Russian advance in Ukraine. Just after 8 o'clock, we'll get the view from Labour, speaking to the Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry and putting to her one of the questions that the Minister suggested I should. And we'll speak to the former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood, who has himself called for Boris Johnson to step down following his Partygate fine. Cristiano Ronaldo and his partner have announced that one of their newborn twins has died. The Manchester United footballer and his girlfriend, Georgina Rodriguez, had announced in October of 2021 that they were expecting twins. In December, they revealed they were expecting a boy and a girl. The couple shared a post on social media yesterday saying, "It is with deepest sadness, what a shame, that we have to announce that our baby boy has passed away. It's the greatest pain that any parent can feel. Only the birth of our baby girl gives us the strength to live this moment with some hope and happiness." Goes on to say, "We kindly ask for privacy at this very difficult time. Our baby boy, you are our angel. We will always love you." Tributes have been pouring in following the announcement. Ronaldo's football club, that's Manchester United, of course, tweeted, "Your pain is our pain, sending love and strength to you and your family at this time." And teammate Marcus Rashford wrote on Twitter, "Thoughts are with you and Georgina, brother. I'm so sorry." And replying to the post on Instagram, Jamaican sprinter Usain Bolt sent his condolences using a string of praying hands emojis. More people have crossed the English Channel in small boats this weekend, just days after the government announced its plan to send some asylum seekers who've made the journey to Rwanda. On Sunday, 76 people crossed the Channel in small boats. That takes the total number of people who have made the journey so far this year to more than 4,000. Last year, 28,526 people are known to have arrived in the UK via small boats. Let's get more on that, should we? Maddie standing by in Dover again for us this morning. Hi, Maddie. We saw more boats arriving just yesterday. The good weather making migrants feel that they can risk that crossing.
Good morning, Kay. Yes, it was a glorious sunny bank holiday, and as we know now, that encourages more people to take the risk to cross the Channel in these comparatively favourable conditions. Of course, even in the sunniest, flattest, calmest sea, and comparatively good weather, if you were on a proper boat, a yacht, or a ferry, in a tiny dinghy in the middle of the English Channel, it's still incredibly dangerous. And lots and lots of people we know sadly do lose their lives, even in the best weather when they're crossing. So it is dangerous, but the good weather, more people attempt it. And we know from those latest figures from the Ministry of Defence, 76 people crossed, but they said they found just 2 boats. So that gives you a sense of how overcrowded, how dangerous they are. 2 small boats with 76 people on. But even as people were arriving over the weekend, there was the most almighty row unfolding over this, the government's policy decision to send people to Rwanda for processing their asylum claims. It started when the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, criticised the government for outsourcing, for subcontracting their asylum policy, saying, in his view, it was opposite to what the nature of God would have wanted. Then he was supported by his predecessor, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, who, when asked about it, said yes, he thought the policy was sinful. And since then, it's not just the clergy. We've had plenty of Tory grandees and former ministers and members of cabinet criticising the government's policy as well. Most recently, or today even, David Davis, who was writing in the Times that he thought this was not what our hard-fought Brexit freedoms were about. But undoubtedly, there'll be more back and forth over this today.
OK, Maddie, for now, thanks so much indeed. Let's look at some of today's other headlines for you now, should we? And more than 1 million tickets are being sold off at up to half price in an attempt to boost domestic tourism. It means the price of a rail journey from London to Edinburgh could come down to £22. But the discounts are only on certain off-peak services during April and May. Labour said it would come as little comfort following years of soaring fares. But those we've spoken to broadly welcome the promotion.
I think anything to encourage people to not drive, especially when they don't need to, is a good thing.
It's on average £67.50 for me to get to work for a return ticket, so over £300 a week.
Some people don't have the opportunity to go away because it's so expensive, or do nice things because it's so expensive, so it just makes it a bit more open to other people, to more people than it probably is now.
Tell you about five-time Olympic gold medalist Sir Bradley Wiggins. He's revealed he was sexually groomed by a cycling coach when he was just 13 years old. The Tour de France winner said he did not feel he could speak up at the time due to a difficult relationship with his stepfather. The boxer Amir Khan says he was robbed at gunpoint in East London. He tweeted that he had been confronted by two men who pointed a gun in his face. He says he was with his wife at the time. He says no one was physically hurt.
My company announces at this moment, if you choose to, you may remove your mask.
Travellers in the United States will no longer have to wear masks on planes and trains after a federal judge in Florida ruled it was unlawful. The change has been welcomed by the US travel industry. Sri Lanka has made a request for rapid financial assistance from the International Monetary Fund to mitigate its worst economic crisis in decades. Anti-government protesters have been talking to the Sri Lankan streets as the country edges towards bankruptcy. Johnny Depp is expected to give evidence today in the libel cases between him and Amber Heard. It comes after the court was shown a series of pictures of the actor with apparent lacerations and scratches, alleged to have been caused by his former wife. Heard's team say the actor injured his own hand when smashing a phone against the wall. Here's David Blevins.
Johnny Depp appeared slightly more relaxed as the libel trial resumed for a second week. He and his ex-wife Amber Heard, who are suing each other over an article she wrote about domestic violence, both returned to the Virginia courtroom. Depp's personal doctor read a long list of disorders he's been treating the actor for.
Primary dopamine imbalance, ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, bipolar 1, depression secondary to above, insomnia, chronic substance abuse disorder.
He described finding Depp with the tip of his finger sliced off following a row between the couple in Australia.
How long did you attend Mr. Depp outside of the house?
Not long, probably a half hour, because I needed to get him to the emergency room. I went in to instruct one of the people with him to look for the tip of the finger, hoping that we would be able to put it back.
Was the tip of the finger found?
It was found.
Who found it?
I believe this man was their chef.
And do you know where he found it or where he told you he found it?
He said he found it in the kitchen area.
The doctor said he'd never witnessed Johnny Depp physically abuse Amber Heard and he'd never treated her for any injury. Depp, who's expected to give evidence today, is suing his ex-wife for $50 million, alleging she defamed him in the article. She's countersuing him for $100 million, alleging he defamed her by describing her claims as fake. David Blevins, Sky News, Washington.
Should we take you to Italy now? Why not? Where Greenpeace activists have written the message on the side of a Russian crude oil tanker at sea. Here we go. Use yellow paint. They wrote "Peace, not oil" in large yellow letters on the side of the tanker, urging European governments to stop using fossil fuels. They had sailed out to the tanker in a rubber dinghy off the coast of Sycurus in Sicily. What's happening as far as the weather's concerned? Let's find out.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Next few days will be cooler and fresher than recently, with a scattering of showers, mainly dry and quite chilly, with the ground frost in parts of the north and the west.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Back to Florida now, where residents in Venice had a surprise early morning visitor. Here he is. Look at the size of him. An alligator was spotted sauntering along a residential street at Harrington Lake looking for water. It looks like it may have misjudged just how long the walk was. You can see it's taking tiny little breaks, no one's going to stop him, and resting, going to rest on someone's driveway. Yeah, just having a minute. However, as you can see, he did finally find his way back to water. The thing with crocs and alligators is that you think they move quite slowly. If they think that you're food, watch how quick they move then. Yeah, trust me, he goes in. Now, tot to trot. Pictured in the Telegraph, we have a picture of, oh, aren't they gorgeous? I saw them this morning, Bonnie and Truly Edwards, rather dashingly dressed, taking part in the London Harness Horse Parade in West Sussex. It's been an Easter Monday tradition for 135 years. I'm guessing their parents were very proud indeed. Time shows us a rather challenging job. A group of beekeepers in Somerset dressed in full PPE while holding smokers in case the bees get a little bit agitated. Yeah, they've probably still got the odd sting though, didn't they? Wouldn't be for me. And the ultimate cat fight, quite literally. The Sun displays a picture of a female tiger attacking her mate in India, allegedly because he wasn't in the mood. I think that people who write those sort of headlines don't really understand what cats are doing, because female cats are never in the mood. They just do it to procreate. And he was probably being very interested. Now, just my guess. Coming up, I'm going to get reaction to the latest development in Ukraine with the former British ambassador to Russia, Sir Tony Brenton. That to come. Hello again, everybody. Lots to talk about today. Obviously, we'll be discussing the latest situation in Ukraine. Do stay with us here on The Breakfast Show here on Sky, Tuesday morning. Before that, though, Partygate. Yes, it's rearing its head again today. Ali is here. Why, Ali? Good morning.
Really big week for the Prime Minister, because obviously all of this happened in recess, which I think often sort of stilts momentum a bit. You don't have politicians able to talk to people, plot face to face. But now MPs are back and the Prime Minister has said he will address the Commons, set the record straight today. It's going to be a really important week. You were speaking to Brandon Lewis this morning. I thought he was really interesting because he kept saying he accepted the police's decision, that they had looked into this. But I felt like he was really stopping short of saying that he accepted that the Prime Minister had broken the rules. And I think that will be difficult ground for the Prime Minister to tread.
What was really interesting, sorry to interrupt that, because it was interesting that he was making the comparisons with parking fines from Tony Blair and breaking the COVID rules, laws that he'd made himself. Should we just have a quick listen to what he said? Here we go.
We've had Prime Ministers in the past have penalty notices, from what I can see, and we've also had front-bench ministers. Well, I saw there was a parking notice that Tony Blair had once. We've seen front-bench Labour ministers.
No, you make the point.
Government ministers
think
as well.
The previous Prime Minister having a parking fine is in any way correlated to our Prime Minister making COVID rules when the country was in lockdown? 120,000 people have died, and you can make the comparison between the two?
You're saying to me...
No, I'm asking you if you can.
You asked me if somebody who sets the laws and the rules can also be somebody who breaks rules. That clearly has happened with a number of ministers over the years.
But Tony Blair didn't make the rules on parking.
Well, the government is responsible for all of the rules and regulations, so you could argue that governments don't pass some of the specific local fines on parking, but still, if a parking fine is broken, it's still a law of the country.
Are you completely comfortable making the comparisons with parking fines and what the Prime Minister did?
I'm just making the point that...
No, I'm just asking if you are, in all sincerity.
Yeah, absolutely, in the sense that ministers in the past have, sadly, been subject to getting fixed penalty notices on a range of issues.
Pretty interesting, to say the least, comparison I think he's making between parking fines, which are usually civil, and fixed penalty notices, which if they're not paid, this is what the Prime Minister got, could end up with criminal, well, we know he got criminal sanctions, but if they're not paid, there could be criminal conviction even. So it's an unusual comparison to be making. I think, the big question now, perhaps the most important question this week, is the Prime Minister going to get any more fines? Because we've seen 7 MPs now publicly calling for him to go immediately, double that around to publicly questioning his position. But what you get is a sort of drip, now particularly the MPs are back. And if we get even more indications that he has broken the rules, I think this will become increasingly hard to defend and we could see things changing really quickly.
OK, Ali, for now, thanks so much indeed. Thanks a lot. Meantime, I also actually, and we'll see you at 9 o'clock, of course, won't we, for Ali's take. Thank you. Meanwhile, I also asked the Minister this morning, the Northern Ireland Secretary, about 2 British fighters that have been taken hostage in Ukraine by Russian forces. What should happen with them now? What Russia's saying is, if you give us Viktor Medvedchuk, then you can have these 2 Brits back. Is that something that we would get involved with, that sort of negotiation? This is an oligarch who, as we know, was an opposition leader in Ukraine for a while, MP there, I think, at the moment.
Well, we're actually going through the process of sanctioning people who are close to the Putin regime. We're not going to be looking at how we can help Russia. We're looking to actually ensure that the Putin regime is unsuccessful in this abhorrent invasion, and we'll continue to do everything we can to support the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian president and government to defeat Putin.
I understand. So these guys are on their own then, really, for now?
Well, they shouldn't have been there. It is an illegal act to be there. Obviously, anybody will have sympathy with somebody who has been taken hostage, but we have got to make sure that we follow the proper processes, that we are dealing with this in the right way. We give the support in the right way that the Ukrainian armed forces and the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian people can make good use of.
Let's bring in Deborah Shudwi. She's standing by for us in Kiev this morning. Deborah, I'm not sure if you heard much of the interview with the Minister. Obviously, you're in a war zone this morning, but it does look as though those 2 guys are on their own.
Yes, well, he was making clear, wasn't he, that the British government isn't approving of any British citizen wanting to come here and join the fight. But there are a number of volunteers on the ground that have been motivated by Ukraine's fight for survival against Russia's invasion. The Russian Foreign Ministry has actually said that, or claimed there to be hundreds of foreign fighters in the besieged city of Mariupol, which is one of the key focuses at the moment of the war. It's a city that Russia has been trying to take from the very beginning on the southeast port of the Sea of Azov. And there is this core of fighters, Ukrainian fighters largely, that have been holding out. They were given a window to surrender, to lay down their arms on Sunday. They refused to do that and are still holding out. And it is all part of this wider offensive that Ukraine's president declared had begun in the Donbas region, a second phase of the war, almost 2 months in, and a phase that both sides need to win. It could be a decisive moment. Russia failed to take the capital, Kyiv. It then has had a rethink. It's obviously learnt from its mistakes and setbacks and is now focusing its superior firepower on the east, which means a huge test for the Ukrainian military, which has managed to withstand against the odds the Russian offensive so far, but will need all the support it can get from its Western allies in terms of weapons if it's going to be able to hold out again in the east, which is so vital if it's going to continue to push Russia back and thwart Vladimir Putin's attempt to topple the government here in Kyiv.
OK, for now, thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Deborah. Meantime, let's speak to the former British ambassador to Russia, should we, Sir Tony Brenton. Hello to you, Sir Tony. It's good to see you again. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. First of all, should we just start with the latest situation in the Donbas region? It does look as though, I mean, initially when the war first broke out, we thought this was the region that Russia would be most interested in. They had a scattergun approach, but now consolidating in that area. How surprised are you?
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. This has been pretty clearly coming for a few weeks, as the Russians have been, after failing in their initial assault on Kyiv, have been reorganizing to go precisely for the Donbas. The Donbas is the logical place for them to go for. One of the claims they've made in launching the war was to protect the population of the Donbas from what they describe as Ukrainian genocide. I'm sorry.
That's OK. As long as it's not President Putin, we can wait.
No. OK, I've killed it. This was predictable. It is now launched, and it is, as your correspondent Deborah, I think, said, probably we're now at the decisive phase of the war, because one of 2 things can happen. Either they succeed in the Donbas and take that region, in which case they've got a huge negotiating ploy. They've got a huge negotiating ploy to use with the Ukrainians in any discussions that might then take place, or there is a danger that Putin may revive his earlier ambition of going again for Kiev and going for the whole of Ukraine, in effect. Yeah. The alternative, and I suspect more likely, of course, is that this thing is going to get bogged down as their previous offensive gets bogged down. You're in for a quite long war of attrition between the two sides, at which point both sides at some point will begin looking for a negotiated outcome. But we'll have to see. A lot now depends immensely on how the military campaign goes.
Yeah, has it not been proven, or have we not seen that Ukrainian fighters are more than what President Putin was expecting? They have suffered heavy defeats, both with their armory and indeed with their military personnel as well. And trying to take over the whole of Ukraine is not feasible.
Well, it was not feasible on their original approach, which was to send their troops in every possible direction. Whether it is feasible to take the Donbas and then proceed from there remains to be seen. As I say, I think the likelihood is not. And yes, we all got it wrong initially. The chief of the US General Staff said at the very beginning that the Russians were likely to be able to take Kiev in 72 hours. So lots of military experts have got egg on their face about the incapacity of the Russians to win the war as they initially fought it. The big question is whether they've resolved the incompetence that they showed the first time round. They found themselves, as you said, up against a much more effective and cohesive and high morale Ukrainian armed force than they expected, and also a Ukrainian armed force which has been massively armed, and the UK has had a lot to do with this, by the West, which has made a very big difference to their ability to advance.
Talk to me about, I mean, we said that you were the ambassador to Russia in, I think, 2004 to 2008, I think.
That's right, yes.
Saying, Mr. Ambassador, I'm sure you must have met Putin in that time. What sort of man, how do you remember him, and how do you think he'll be dealing with what's happening in Ukraine at the moment?
Well, how I remember him is as a very able, focused, not very nice leader of Russia, driven by the desire to make Russia great again, to coin a phrase. And a man who took risks, but calculated rather carefully before taking them. Very clearly, the Putin we're dealing with now is in some significant ways different, that he has launched this, he's taken this huge risk of this war. I think he's been brooding over his isolation during COVID about Ukraine, which he sees as central to making Russia great again. Has launched this war, which it looks very unlikely that he can win on the terms that he originally set for himself. So he's disappointed, I suspect. He's angry. He's talked a couple of times about going nuclear, which would be a very big threshold to cross if he went for it. But I wouldn't rule it out entirely if things go very badly wrong for him. So I suspect that what we need to be doing is persuading, if not him personally, then the people around him, that there is a respectable way out of this for Russia, and which preserves Ukraine, and we need to be edging our way towards that.
So does the West have to give him, from what you're saying, some sort of get out clause so that he won't use potentially nuclear weapons? Is that what you're saying?
Let me give you a little bit of history. Back in 1962, President John F. Kennedy, dealing with the Cuban Missile Crisis, said that what the United States absolutely must not do is confront a nuclear-armed adversary, by which he meant the Soviet Union at the time, with the choice between total humiliation and nuclear escalation. That remains as true today as it was when he said it. Yes, the Russians have behaved appallingly. Yes, the political feel of dealing with a country which has committed so many atrocities and so many illegalities is going to be very hard. But if the alternative is to move across the nuclear threshold, then we're going to have to bite our tongues a bit and do it.
In the meantime, what about these two British fighters? As far as the British government is concerned, via the Northern Ireland Secretary this morning, you know, they're there illegally. And it does sound as though they're on their own for now. Russia wants to do a deal, a prisoner swap deal, if you will, with a Ukrainian MP, former leader of the opposition in Ukraine. What do you think Putin will do about these two?
I think he probably sees them as negotiating material for use with us. We, in Putin's eyes, are among the most rabid of the West's opponents to Russia. they are useful for discussions as part of what eventually we all hope will be a peace negotiation. There are some things we obviously need to be doing. We need to be seeking consular access to them to make sure that they're being treated decently. We need to make it clear to Putin that indeed their fate will form part of whatever negotiation we eventually end up in. And if they are maltreated, then that will form part of our attitude in those negotiations. But in terms of getting them out quickly, barring a real change of mood on the part of the Russians, I don't think that that's very likely to happen.
OK. So, Tony, fascinating stuff. I'll let you get back to your phone call. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Sorry about that.
Much appreciated. Not at all. Thank you for joining us.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Now, footage has been released of soldiers and civilians, many of which are children, holed up in a steelworks in the port city of Mariupol as the fighting continues around them. Ukrainian officials say Russia is dropping more bombs as it looks to fully capture Mariupol after a 6-week assault. Mark Stone reports a warning. His report does contain distressing images, including a body.
Released late last night, this video, it is claimed, shows the last remaining civilians in Mariupol. They're in a makeshift bomb shelter at the steelworks in this key port city. The video was filmed and released by the Ukrainian military's Azov battalion. It is their soldiers who have been holding out for weeks against the Russian forces here, and they are now cornered in the steelworks. We can't yet independently verify when it was filmed or precisely where, but Azov commanders are using it as an appeal.
Я командир полку Азов, підполковник Денис Прокопенко.
I am the commander of the Azov regiment, he says, and I call on the leaders of the world. Right now, in Mariupol, at the steel factory, hundreds of civilians are sheltering. They found their only available shelter was next to Ukrainian soldiers who are still defending the city from Russian invaders. I urge the politicians of the civilized world to organize a proper green corridor to ensure safety and provide immediate evacuation for everyone. This drone footage was released yesterday by the same Ukrainian unit. It shows their soldiers still capable of an attack against their Russian enemy. We've located it to the city, but we can't verify when it was filmed. And to the northwest, in Dnipro, at the military cemetery, the daily burials. A family's farewell, a unit's farewell. Just 2 weeks ago, there was just one row of graves here. This is one cemetery, in one city, in one region. Andrei Bresletev was 25.
It's the scale of the loss and the waste. It really hits you here. And the tragedy is that there is no sign at all of anything changing. Quite the opposite.
The breadth of the Monday Russian barrage has been remarkable. This is Kharkiv, 250 miles north of Mariupol, 700 miles east of the attacks in Lviv. Ukraine's second city, still being bombarded, still resisting occupation. But here's the cost. The victim is her father. Mark Stone, Sky News, in eastern Ukraine.
President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian forces have begun a new offensive in the Donbas region of Ukraine. Local media reporting a series of explosions have been heard, with air sirens going off during the night. Joining us is former Ukrainian ambassador to the EU, Konstantin Yezidlev. It's good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Forgive me for the pronunciation of your surname, sir. What's your understanding of what is happening to the east of your country?
First of all, as you know, Russian troops unleashed heavy and massive artillery and missile and rocket fire all along the eastern flank of Ukraine. And this is, I would call, the second stage of Russian full-fledged war against Ukraine. And you just showed the picture of Mariupol, which has become a symbol of Ukraine's struggle against the Russian war. And once again, this is a full-fledged, bloody war unleashed by Putin's regime. And on the example of Mariupol, Putin clearly shows what he wants to do with Ukraine tomorrow. That's why this is a warning signal and alarm to the entire democratic world to act, not just to talk the talks, but to do something more clear, to show the bravery, and finally to help the Ukrainian people to win in this bloody war, because we need your help in order to save you, because we are struggling and we are fighting not only for Ukraine, we are struggling for the entire democratic world.
Do you get the impression that Russia is consolidating now to the east of the country, or do you think they're regrouping and there is cause for concern for the rest of the country again? We know that people had started to return to Lviv, haven't they? But there have been at least 7 explosions overnight.
Look, on the example of Lviv, which is a western part of Ukraine, this is a clear example that there is no safe place in Ukraine now. But for you, I would like to explain that Putin do not need neither Mariupol, no Donbas, no Lviv. He would like to have in its own pocket the whole Ukraine. His aim just to, if not to conquer Ukraine, at least to erase Ukraine from the map from the international map. So that's why now we are fighting for our existence, for our independence. The tragedy of the situation that Ukrainians, we would like to survive. We would like to live in peace and democracy. And at the same time, Putin would like to see all us dead. So I would like just to call upon to the entire world, please understand us clearly. Currently, under your eyes, there is a real tragedy. So please help us and please act more decisively, not to wait, not to think. And in this regard, I count very much on the leadership of Great Britain and the United States in order to mobilize the massive support in terms of defensive and offensive weapons to Ukraine.
Okay. We appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning, sir. Do keep safe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, let me just show you this story in today's Times that is a reminder why stealing is never a smart idea. A man in Ukraine has been able to track the location of the Russian soldier who stole his AirPod Apple headphones from his home in Kiev by using the Find My feature. The man posted updates of the AirPods' journey on social media. He was able to track the redeployment of soldiers to the Russian city of Belgorod, where troops are amassing for an assault on the Donbas region of Ukraine. How clever was that? And how stupid not to switch off the Find My Phone feature if you've already stolen somebody's things. There you go. So you never thought it would be that useful. I'm sure he's not going to be asking for them back, though. And a government minister has defended the Prime Minister's COVID fine to receiving a parking ticket. We'll get the view of Labour's Shadow Attorney General in just a few moments' time. So we heard from the Northern Ireland Secretary. He said that breaking the COVID rules that the Prime Minister had made, for which he got a fine, can be comparable with a parking fine that the previous Prime Minister, Tony Blair, received when he was Prime Minister. You decide. See you in a sec.